Tonight, we continue our series on extremist hate groups in Idaho. Last night, we heard how they are created and the threat they pose. Tonight, we take a look inside these groups and what drives people to these fringe and often violent beliefs. Here's Justin Core.
Yesterday, after discussing the rise of extremist hate groups in our state, we left with a question. What in the world would convince a person to embrace these sickening ideologies? Well, it most often has little to do with the ideology itself.
Well, I think polarization across the board is on the rise.
Tony McAleer is the president of the Cure for Hate Consulting Group, which helps people respond to the threat of violent white supremacist groups in their communities. He's also the author of the book, The Cure for Hate. He's an international speaker and has more than 10 years of experience helping people leave white supremacist movements behind. So how did Tony become such an expert on white supremacists? Well, he used to be one.
I said at the age of 20, I'll be dead or in jail as a white revolutionary by the time I'm 30.
Tony had, from what the outside looked like, a normal childhood, a middle-class family in an affluent neighborhood in Vancouver. While he says he does not blame anything on his childhood, he did point to some pivotal moments that shaped his future, like abuse at school and walking in on his father having an affair. He said he lost faith in authority figures and developed not just a need to rebel against everything, but a pervasive anger.
And sort of that anger and defiance and mistrust of authority sort of primed me for first becoming a skinhead and later joining the Aryan Nations.
The same Aryan Nations that plagued Idaho throughout the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s from its headquarters near Coeur d'Alene. He deeply regrets it now, but at the time,
it was exciting. The notoriety, the taboo nature of it. It's like, the guard towers and guys with machine guns and stuff. I mean, the to, a 19, 20-year-old brain and in the full throes of rebellion and defiance to authority, that was the ultimate place to go.
It was here in this Idaho compound that not just the Aryan Nations, but neo-Nazis, Klansmen, and other white nationalists came from across the country to convene, spread hate, and violence. McAleer eventually moved on from this group to the even more radical white Aryan resistance. But why was he so attracted to it at all? He says he was able to get something back that he lost as a kid.
There was always these older father figure types in the movement, whether it be Pastor Butler or Tom Metzger or any of these things that gave me the attention and acceptance and approval that I could never get from my dad. I got a sense of brotherhood and community. I got attention when I felt invisible. I got acceptance when I felt unlovable, and I got power when I felt completely powerless and weak.
So if all that turned an average kid into a white supremacist, what turned that white supremacist into a crusader for love, acceptance, and compassion? He says it was the birth of his daughter and later his son that forced him to confront who he really was.
They saw this great, magnificent human being that was taking care of them. I didn't see that when I looked in the mirror.
He left those white supremacist groups and started working to get others out as well after finally confronting his childhood trauma. It's a trauma that he says is very common in those groups, which causes the members to hate themselves first before hating others. It's called toxic shame.
I truly believe the level to which we dehumanize other human beings is a mere reflection of our own internal disconnection and dehumanization. And we feel that we're not good enough, we're not worthy enough, we're less than human, we're not smart enough, pretty enough, we're not lovable. Whatever set of beliefs we pick up as a result of trauma we project onto others as our way of dealing with it.
And the recruiters for those hate groups understand this, partly because this violent sort of coping mechanism is not unique to American hate groups.
There are a lot of commonalities between sort of Islamist-inspired terrorism and domestic terrorist groups in the United States.
Dr. Royce Hudson is a Boise State researcher who also has years of experience in the Middle East, working to understand why so many young men were joining Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda. He says there's often a strong religious component there, a warping of the scriptures, just like we see with hate groups here that claim a Christian identity, even though they are far from it. But mostly, they offer that same feeling of belonging, like what drew McAleer to the Aryan nations, to people who have been excluded socially, economically, and culturally.
So they feel like somehow their community and themselves are being attacked. And then when they do hear narratives coming from other terrorist or violent extremist organizations and say, hey, look, you're not to blame for your particular lot in life. It's this group over here. It's these invaders coming from across the border, or it's Islamists coming across here and trying to invoke Sharia law. So it's the same sort of narrative, it's just flipped around.
So, we've talked about the rise of these hate groups and how people can be drawn to them, but what can we do as a community to stop all that? You're going to hear from local leaders about exactly how to do that in the final installment of this series. Back to you.
And you can see that story right here tomorrow night on the news at 10.